This presentation is going to be on 30 tendon concepts. My name is Jake Tura. I've had patellar tendinopathy probably 4 or 5 times, Achilles tendinopathy, rotator cuff tendinopathy, elbow tendinopathy, golfer's elbow, tennis elbow. I've had a lat tendon tear, dealt with a lot of tendon issues, and most athletes who compete in explosive sports, for me is basketball, they run into tendon problems, and the rehab is usually not very good. The understanding of tendons is not very good. So I've put together 30 different things that I've learned over the last 5 years, doing my own research, talking to the top tendon experts in the world, and helping a few thousand people through their tendon issues, which were usually patellar or Achilles problems. So I tried to make this seamless, but some of these I've just thrown in there, and I'm going to try to make sense of them the best I can. So, the first thing to start out with when you talk about tendons is realizing that tendons are pretty dumb. Um, Muscles, you can research. There's so much research on muscles with getting them bigger, getting them stronger, intramuscular, intermuscular coordination, how the brain controls muscles, how you can have fast spinal cord reflexes. And then on the other end, you have bone, which you don't need to worry too much about bone, but bone is in charge of us moving our skeleton through space. And if you break your bone, you just rest, you let it heal, and usually back to what you want to do. But when it comes to the middleman, the tendon, it actually doesn't do anything. It's not going to do anything unless the bone puts it in a position where it needs to respond to the pull, or if muscle's going to pull on it. Tendon is it's not really controlled by the nervous system. It's not innervated like a muscle is. Um, there's not much blood flow. There's not much oxygen demand. So tendon is pretty stupid. So then you'd kind of be like, well, why do we have so many tendon issues? And it's probably from our lack of understanding of tendons, what they take for training, what they take for recovery. But also when you run into some muscular issue, it can manifest as a tendon. So tendon is just this middleman that's at the disposal of the muscle and the bone. So why do we even have a tendon then? If we don't understand much about them, they get injured often. Because if you tried to connect a muscle to the bone, that wouldn't work. You'd probably be tearing your muscle all the time. Because muscle is so stretchy and bone is so stiff. So tendon is kind of in the middle. You look at this graph, you have the bone end, the green, which is a very stiff end of the tendon, and then you have the muscle end, the red, which is a more compliant end of the tendon. So the tendon creates this interface where you can connect the muscle to the bone. When the bone is doing something, it can be relayed through the tendon to the muscle, and if the muscle wants to pull on the bone, it can be relayed through the tendon to go towards the bone. So if you want to move your body, your muscle works through your tendon to your bone. And I guess sometimes if you want to stop your body, the bone will be pulling on the tendon, which then will tell the muscle what to do. So if we kind of look at the purpose of tendon, one of the big ones is conserving energy. So if you look at someone just jogging, if you jog and you don't have a tendon, your muscle has to do all that work. So think of all the eccentric, concentric contractions that the muscle would have to do. That costs a lot of energy, and the body wouldn't want to do that. So we have a tendon where it can be the one. If the muscle is just working isometrically, just holding a position, the tendon can be the one to be lengthening, shortening, because the tendon doesn't require any energy. So you can conserve muscular energy, I guess conserve calories, because your tendon doesn't need any of that. So your tendon can just be this stiff middleman that is doing the recycling of energy so that you have more metabolic economy. The other big one, which everyone talks about, is tendons can amplify power, so it's a stiff spring. But you got to be careful when you talk about a spring, because if you think of a spring, you think you're gonna just press down on a spring and then it's gonna come up. But you never mash down on a tendon. That's not how tendons work. You always pull on the tendon. So you could think of the muscle as pulling on the tendon. When you dip down in a vertical jump, your muscle is pulling on the tendon. The tendon is resisting that pull, and because it's resisting, it's storing some energy. And then when you stop that pull and you want to reverse the action, the tendon can act on the bone, release the energy through the bone so that you can amplify your power, but so it actually happens faster than the muscle could do. So you think of pulling on the spring and then letting go of that pull, the spring is gonna recoil, and you're gonna have that action happen at your bone, which is going to amplify your power. So counter movement, vertical jump, or an acceleration are probably the two easiest things where you could see that. And kind of the last purpose that I've come up with tendon is that it protects the muscle. So look at this basketball guy. He's going to stop. He's going to decelerate. And let's look at the knee. So the tibia is going to be shoving forward, and the muscle needs to stop that. If the muscle didn't stop that, your knees would just buckle. You'd probably fall on your face, or maybe you'd blow your ACL. But anyways, the tibia is going forward, and the quadriceps need to stop that. But it doesn't go from the tibia to the quadriceps. It stops, it goes to the patellar tendon first. And the tendon can actually take that energy and store it within the tendon for a brief period of time, and then it can more slowly release it to the muscle. Because if you have to stop as fast as possible, and the muscle has to take it, you're going to have a fast eccentric contraction, which is very damaging to your muscle. So to prevent the damage, the tendon stores the energy, and then it more slowly releases it to the muscle, because the tendon can't dissipate the energy, the muscle has to dissipate it. But if it is sent to the muscle very quickly, you're going to get a lot of muscle damage. So the tendon can act as this temporary storage facility for energy, and then more slowly give it to the muscle. So it's actually protecting the muscle from excess damage. So those are kind of the purposes of tendon that I have come up with, is that it connects muscle to bone, which would otherwise be impossible. It conserves energy by allowing the muscle just to work isometrically while the tendon does the lengthening and shortening. It amplifies power because it's a stiff spring and it resists deformation. And then when you let go of that, it can act on the bone to amplify your power, do things more quickly. And then the last one is it protects muscle. So I kind of have these four purposes of tendon, and that is kind of why we have tendons in the first place. So let's look at how a tendon is going to fulfill all of these purposes. And the first is just looking at the structure. The structure is going to tell you. So tendon is organized in a hierarchy. You can see these photos. I've looked at hundreds of these. You have the whole tendon on the right side, or both of the photos, whole tendon on the right side, and it goes down into the fascicles. You have multiple fascicles within a tendon. Fascicles go into fibers, the fibers go into fibrils, and the fibrils go into the collagen. So if we talk about the tendon, it's 70% of it is water, just like everything in your body, mostly water. But of the other 30%, 60 to 80% of it is collagen. So the tendon is just packed with collagen, and collagen makes a tendon strong. So that's just how the hierarchy goes. It's a whole tendon down into fascicle, fiber, fibril, collagen, and the fascicle is just loaded with collagen. So I've kind of looked at tendons as having two main components. You have the fascicles, which on that left photo are the gray bundles. You see like the circles. Those are filled with collagen. There are other things in there, but it's mostly collagen. And then you have the interfascicular matrix, the gel. So this is like a fluid component of the tendon, and that's the pink area. This allows for sliding and rotating of the collagen fascicles. We're going to get into that soon, but these are kind of the two components that I look at with a tendon. Is you have the collagen fascicles, which are there for the strength, and then you have the interfascicular matrix gel, which is not talked about very often, and I don't think that is right. So let's go to the fascicles. The fascicle is made up of collagen, which I've said, and you could think of this as like a steel cable. Like on a bridge, there's many steel cables, just like there are many fascicles in a tendon. These make the tendon strong and stiff. When I say stiff, that means that when you pull on the tendon, it resists the pull. It doesn't want to deform much, and that's a good thing for a tendon. You don't want to have excess deformation. You don't want to have the tendon not be stiff, because then I guess you might rupture it because it needs to be able to withstand what's happening at the bone and what's happening at the muscle. This photo on the right is a rat, I think it's a rat tail tendon, and you can see the individual fascicles. I guess one, two, three, four, five, six, seven of them, and those fascicles are just packed with collagen to keep the tendon strong. If you look at the interfascicular matrix, it's a fluid-like gel. This makes the tendon elastic, so it has elastic fibers or elastin. That photo on the right, you see the elastic fiber when it's at rest, and then when you stretch it, it can stretch super far, way more than collagen can. So these things are working together. The interfascicular matrix and the fascicles, they're working together. You probably get your elasticity from the interfascicular matrix, you get lubrication from the interfascicular matrix, and the collagen fascicles are what make the tendon strong. So they're working together. If we look at a term like strength, you get your tendon strength from the collagen. If you look at elasticity, you probably get your elasticity from the interfascicular matrix gel. You want your tendon to be extensible, so meaning that you pull on it and it can extend somewhat. You get that linear extension from the collagen fascicles, and then you get sliding and rotating of the collagen fascicles, probably from the interfascicular matrix gel. So the gel is kind of protecting the collagen fascicles from excess extensibility, because if you extend the collagen fascicles too much, you're going to break the collagen, and you don't want that. So you want to protect it, and you kind of get protection from the interfascicular matrix because it allows sliding and rotating of the collagen fascicles, kind of unloading them. So if you look at when you're loading a tendon, collagen strain within the fascicles, collagen strain is pretty simple. That graph there, you can see at the bottom the crimped fibers, and then that photo is crimped fibers as well. So the collagen fibrils are bent. They're bent when they're at rest, and then when you pull on them, they straighten, and then they straighten to a point, and then if you straighten them too far, they're going to rupture. They're going to break. So you have this happening when you go through cycles of loading and unloading. Is you crimp when you're unloaded, you straighten when you're loaded. You go back to crimp, you go back to straight. So it's pretty simple. That's kind of how tendons, the collagen operates within tendons. And this could be a role of elasticity within tendons, probably at a very low level when you're doing something like maybe slow walking. For your Achilles is probably getting crimped when you're unloaded, and then it's just getting a little bit of a pull, and then it's going back to crimp, and then a little bit of a pull. That's probably happening when you're doing low effort things. So if you look at the interfascicular matrix strain, that's much more complex, and it makes sense. It's a gel. It's not just this like steel cable like collagen is, but it's a gel. It's a fluid-like component, so it takes a beating, and it gets linear pull just like collagen, but it also gets compressed, and it also gets shear stress. So this is kind of the line of defense for a tendon, is when you start to beat up a tendon, you give it a lot of loads. The interfascicular matrix is great at taking the early beating and sparing the collagen from taking that itself. So, and the interfascicular matrix is a gel. It just recovers quickly. We're going to get into that later, but the interfascicular matrix and the collagen work together. Interfascicular matrix, probably the elasticity allows for sliding, rotating of the collagen fascicles, and the collagen fascicles, which make up the majority of the tendon, are making it strong. So if you look at how these are built, collagen, this analogy was made by Michael Kerr, the researcher, that you have big trees, which this tree here, the massive tree, would be the big tree, and then you have small trees, which would be the ones spinning around it. And look at this photo on the right. These are collagen fibrils, like kind of looking at them down the barrel. If you cut the tendon in half, the big trees are, the idea is they're built when you're maturing, and then when you're matured, they're done. They're done building. So the big trees are built for 17 years, about 17 years when you reach skeletal maturity, and then they're done. But it took you 17 years to build them. They're big, they're packed with collagen, they're super strong. But then you have these small trees around them, and you can see those small ones kind of a different, the idea is they're spinning around the big trees, and they can take load just like the big ones can. But the thing with the small trees is that they are actually broken down and built up every day. So they're not static like the majority of your collagen. They're actually super dynamic. So it kind of gives you a barrier to, you can break these things down all the time and you're going to be building them back. Michael Kerr, Chloe Young, Carl Cadler, they've done a bunch of research on these, the tendon and how much percentage. So they would say the big trees make up like 95 to 97% of your tendon, and the small trees make up like 3 to 5% of your tendon. So it's not much, but those things are broken down, built up every day, and they give you kind of this leeway for yourself to give you a bunch of damage to your tendon, with components that are going to be dynamically rotated in and out. So that's kind of the way things go now, unless you get an injury. If you injure the big trees, if you get a rupture of the tendon or you injure the big trees, then things would kind of change. We'll get into that later. But if we look at the intervascular matrix, the IFM, the gel component, that's way more dynamic. So you have the collagen that's mostly static, not doing much, but the IFM is way more dynamic. If you look at this photo on the right, you can see those within the IFM, you have those darker purple dots, and those are the cells. So you have way more cells. You can compare that to the collagen that's around. Way more cells in the IFM, which means you probably have higher blood flow, maybe more oxygen. You just have more activity there. So if you do damage it, it's very quick to turn around. The photo on the left there is an illustration of the collagen going right and left, and then within is the intervascular matrix. So when you overload the tendon, the whole thing kind of just becomes one. But if you offload when you've disrupted the IFM, it's very quick to turn back to normal. And this is kind of mirrored with the tendinopathy continuum. So you take a normal tendon, and if you overload it, or you get individual factors like metabolic health, diabetes, that can cause a reactive tendinopathy. Going to talk about that later. But let's just say load for the sake of simplicity right now. You have a normal tendon, you overload it, it gets to a reactive tendinopathy, and that would be the IFM is overloaded, the gel is overloaded. If you just give it a little bit of rest, maybe a few days, a few weeks, maybe not a few weeks, maybe a few days, it should return to normal, should go back to a normal tendon. But if you take that IFM that's overloaded and you keep loading, you get tendon disrepair, you get a degenerative tendinopathy. That is when you'd be tapping into the collagen. So the IFM is already blown with the reactive tendinopathy, and now you're probably breaking the small fibrils, and then you'll be breaking the big fibrils, and you have a degenerative tendinopathy. So I'm convinced that most people have had a reactive tendinopathy if they compete in sports. They get a painful tendon, it might be red and hot, and they do what anyone should do, is rest. They just rest a little bit and it returns to a normal tendon. The problem is when you don't rest and you keep pushing, you keep overloading, that's where you start to tap into the collagen, and you might get irreversible damage because collagen is fairly static. It's hard to get that to reverse. So from the tendinopathy continuum, and you look at this normal tendon into a degenerative tendon, when people get treated for tendinopathy, they're going to be a degenerative tendon, because most people don't seek it out for a reactive. They just rest, and then it's when they go in for when they have a degenerative, they probably had it for a few weeks or a few months, and it's just not going away. That's probably where you have disrupted the collagen within. So the idea with treating the donut, this was laid out by Craig Purdom, Jill Cook, Peter Malieris, Sean Docking. The idea is that the hole within the tendon, the disrupted collagen, is mechanically silent, so it can't take load anymore. It's basically useless. It's kind of a dead area. But the tendon will compensate by laying down more collagen around the area of degeneration. So this could take weeks or months, but your body's going to be laying down more collagen because it knows that the tendon is compromised. So it's just going to take a while, but it's going to lay down more collagen. So the idea with treating the donut is that you just treat the area around the degeneration. So you give it progressive loading, which for a tendon is isometrics, and then into normal lifting, isotonics, and then into store and release activities, and then you can progress back to sport. And that could take weeks or months, depends on the person, but you're just saying that let's not worry about the degeneration. Let's just treat the healthy area, and let's keep in mind that we're going to be laying down more collagen tissue over time. This is in opposition to treat the whole, which this was laid out by Keith Barr, where you have a hole, you have a collagen degeneration within the tendon, and the idea is it's mechanically silent, it's getting shielded through load. The load is going around the hole and going to the healthy areas. So what you do is you try to get stress relaxation. You try to get the outside healthy areas to relax, get the load into the unhealthy areas, and in theory, you would be reversing the pathology, getting the whole thing healthy again. And Keith Barr does this with isometrics. So heavy isometrics, hold for like 30, 45 seconds. If you're doing patellar tendon, you would do a leg extension, probably one leg at a time, hold as heavy as possible. And he has a couple case studies where I think it was MRI, one of them might have been ultrasound, where they see a reversal of the hole, of the collagen hole, by doing these isometrics to get stress relaxation and getting the load to be felt in the area of degeneration. So the body comes in and says, let's lay down collagen in the hole. These next 18 to 30 points are just kind of random. So I guess they will relate, but I just kind of threw them in there because there's many different ideas with tendons and tendon health, and it's hard to put it into one cohesive thing. There's just a bunch of random things. So one of them is metabolic health. So I said a tendon can go from a normal tendon to degenerative tendon. And it's usually from load. It's usually from overloading a tendon. But you can also get it from having poor metabolic health, which is what you'd see with people with diabetes. So there was this quote from one of these tendon books I read. It was Collagen from 40-year-old Diabetics. Corresponds to that of normal individuals at 100 years of age. So you can get problems with your collagen by just having dysregulation with your metabolic health. There's many ideas. It affects the tendon cells, but one of them is it affects the cross-linking between the collagen. Because a collagen helix is not very long. It's actually staggered within the fibrils, and it has to be cross-linked. They have to be cross-linked with one another to make the tendon strong. And the cross-links are usually strong cross-links, normal cross-links that happen by way of this enzyme lysyl oxidase, but you can also get it from sugar cross-links from advanced glycation end products. And the idea is people with diabetes would probably have more of that happening from an chronically elevated blood sugar. So their collagen would be cross-linked with more weaker cross-links, more weaker sugar cross-links. And that could probably be one of the reasons why they have worse collagen than people their age who are healthy. So there's this theory with tendinopathy, the iceberg theory, where let's start at the bottom. Physiological exercise, you're doing normal exercise, but then you go into overuse. So you've done too much for your tendon. So you've caused damage, microstructural damage to the tendon, and then you keep doing that. You get more blood flow with the tendon, you get innervation, the tendon is damaged, so what is the natural response to damage? More blood flow, let's get more innervation in there. And then at the top of that, you finally experience pain. But the idea here is that you've done normal exercise and then you've overloaded, and by the time you experience pain, it's kind of too late. You've already done the structural damage. Now that could be the interfascicular matrix, which would be a reactive tendinopathy. It could be the collagen, which could be a degenerative tendinopathy. But you don't really know until you experience pain. So this idea is like you make a training error. You take someone from doing nothing to doing way too much, way too fast, and that's probably what causes these changes within tendon, which then manifest as pain later on. So the training errors are something to avoid. It's just common sense. Building people up slowly is going to probably avoid future tendon pain. There's this graph was made. It was an animal model, but they were looking at when the tendon is built. So you have markers of tendon building, the extracellular matrix, and they are elevated when you're very young, when you're building your tendon. They're elevated, I guess, 100 times a difference than when you're mature. So this animal had crazy elevation of building of their tendon, markers of building of their tendon. And then by the time they're mature, it basically stops, and then the tendon is just sitting there kind of for the rest of their life. But if you get an injury, it's like your second childhood. It rebuilds. The tendon has to rebuild. So you get more blood flow, you get more cells within your tendon, you get innervation within your tendon, you get all these things that are present when you're younger and building your tendon. Whenever you get an injury, it basically restarts. And that process, if you look at a human, was a 17-year process to build a tendon. And then your tendon's built, and let's say you get an injury, a partial tear, a complete rupture, and then it's basically like we got to restart the building process. And then for us, we think, why is my tendon not better in a month or a few months? Whereas I kind of have the idea that if that thing took 17 years to build and now you have to rebuild it, I don't know how you can rush that process or be frustrated when it hasn't happened so fast. So it's just something to be aware of, that tendon took 17 years to build. You tear the thing, maybe you get it reattached, and it's not going to happen fast. It might not take 17 years, but it's not definitely not going to happen fast. Look at this photo on the right. That's a normal tendon, normal collagen within the tendon. You see how it's linearly oriented, because when you pull on a tendon, it's mostly a linear pull, like straight up and down. And then when you get an injury, it gets scarred. Like you can see on the left photo, normal tendon, that's type 1 collagen fibrils, which are thick ones. And then you can see the scarred ones, which are type 3 fibrils, which are more like chaotic. They're smaller. So if you want to reverse the scarred tendon, because you definitely want to, you want to reverse the scarred tendon to go back to a normal tendon after injury, because the normal one is stronger and it's going to be functionally better because it's acting in the way of the force. You want to get that load through the tendon, and it's hard to do. You need to deform the tendon quite a bit. So the photo on the left is tendon force with deformation. So this is the idea of getting a lot of force through the tendon. If you take the patellar tendon, that's why a leg extension is so good. A leg extension isometric is so good, because you can get so much tendon force going through it, and that is going to cause deformation of the tendon, which is what you need. So you need deformation and force go together, and it's hard to pull on a tendon because you got to think a tendon is between a muscle and a bone. The muscles are very stretchy, so if you just get in a deep static stretch, you're probably going to be stretching your muscle, and your tendon's going to be kind of resistant. But if you get into an isometric, like a leg extension, for example, your muscle can be working as hard as possible, and that's over time, 30 seconds, 45 seconds. It's going to be pulling on tendon. It's going to be deforming tendon because there's so much force going through. And you do that over enough days and weeks, you just have to assume that a scarred tendon with type 3 collagen is going to become more normalized to a linear pull tendon with type 1 collagen, because you put so much force through the tendon, and you just give it the signal, hey, we need to reorient in the way the force is going. There was a study done on badminton players and fencers, which, if you know those sports, you have a lead leg, a dominant leg, and they looked at the size of their patellar tendons, and they saw that the lead leg was bigger and the lead leg was stiffer. So this is kind of saying that if you have a lifetime of loading is the way to make a tendon bigger and a way to make a tendon stiffer and stronger. Loading it throughout your entire life. It's what's seen in these sports. It's what's seen in other sports that have dominant legs. Is the tendon that is used more is going to be one that's bigger, and it's going to be the one that's stiffer and stronger. Tendon changes don't happen quickly. They happen over a lifetime. You have two types of tendons. So in this whole talk, I've pretty much, with the talk of the interfascicular matrix, I've talked about the energy storage tendons. So if you look at a horse, they compare this to the Achilles of a human. The SDFT is similar to the Achilles tendon of a human. The CDET is similar to the tibialis anterior tendon. So the one in the back, the Achilles, is the energy storage, which gets the sliding and the rotating. It has a lot of demand on the interfascicular matrix. But the other tendon is a positional tendon, the one in the front, and that doesn't really slide and rotate too much. It doesn't really deal with the same strains as the Achilles tendon. It's just not as important. It just has kind of a stupid role of just connecting the muscle to the muscle to the bone. It doesn't do all that advanced stuff with the protecting the muscle from like storing energy to protect the muscle. It doesn't have the energy conservation demand. It doesn't have as much advanced demands. All it really is like the energy, the Positional tendons are just there to connect the muscle to the bone, whereas the Achilles has all these advanced things that it needs to take care of, and that's why you have the strong collagen mixed with a demand of having sliding and rotating because of the interfascicular matrix. So as you get older, tendon abnormalities are completely normal. This was in a tendon book. I'm just going to read the quote. It said degenerative hypoxia, mucoid degeneration, calcification, and tendolipomatosis all represent phenomena which either singularly or together are visible in a high percentage of tendons in healthy and asymptomatic individuals at the age of 35 years and over. You probably see this in most tissues of the human body that as you load throughout your life, you're probably going to get structural abnormalities. And the same thing happens with tendons. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be in pain. So this whole talk of like treating the donuts or treating the hole, you probably have people walking around with holes in their tendons and they have no pain because pain is complex. But if that hole in the tendon can be correlated to the pain symptoms, which often it can, then that could be a route to try to change those structural changes. But anyways, the point is that abnormalities within your tendon are completely normal. They happen to people that have no pain. You could image anyone 35 years or over, image all their tendons in their body, and they have no tendon pain. They're probably going to have some abnormalities. So going back to filling the donut hole, this was one of these horse tendon books I read, where this image on the left, you can see the tendon hole where they have the damage, and then 5 months later, the whole thing is filled in. And they don't do isometrics with horses. It just happened through graded exposure. So this thing on the right, tendon rehab for a horse, it's just graded. It's just grading the activity for a horse, which they start out with walking, like low volume walking, then a little bit more. Then they trot and they jog, and then they canter, and then they can get into low jumping, and then normal jumping and running. So it's just like very simple, progressive, graded exposure. I don't know what would happen if you actually got a horse on, if you could get a horse on like an isometric or a lifting exercise to get that stress relaxation effect. I don't know what would happen, but this at least gives hope for a human. That's like, do you need to do the heavy isometric loading or the heavy weightlifting, or could we just do very common sense loading and we would see this normalization of tendon structure? I don't know. Immobilization, pretty well known that is very bad for a tendon. This was a quote by Peter Magnuson and Michael Kerr. They said, even 2 to 3 weeks of immobilization of a lower limb in both young and old individuals will lead to an 80% reduction in synthesis rate of collagen. So it's basically like if you don't use your tendon, you're going to lose it. This next graph, we'll hit this home for you. Collagen synthesis rates. So all the way at the bottom, if you immobilize, you do not get collagen synthesis. If you just do daily activities, you get normal collagen synthesis. And if you do any activity outside of daily activities, which is like the research they did was a 10 by 10 leg extension, 1 hour of knee kicking, and a 36-kilometer run, which are like pretty crazy workouts. I don't think you need to do that. If you just train, like do some lifting or do some exercise, you're going to bump up the collagen synthesis rates. And that's what you want if you're trying to keep your tendon strong, or if you're trying to rehab your tendon, is you want collagen synthesis rates to be somewhat elevated. You can also retard a tendon, because when you build a tendon, it happens when you're growing as a kid. But they don't do this research on tendons. They do it, or on humans. They do it on horses. So there was this one study. They took 3 groups of horses. They took them from 1 week old to 5 months old. They separated them into 3 groups. So the first group had no exercise. They were just stuck in the stall all day. And then the second group was in the stall, but they had exercise. And the third group was just left in a pasture to do whatever they wanted. And after 5 months, they killed all the horses so they could look at the cross-sectional area of their tendons. And they found that if you were just stuck in the stall, your tendon was pretty small. If you were stuck in the stall and then you just did a little bit of exercise every day, your tendon was still small. And if you just played in the pasture all day, you were given unlimited exercise, your tendon was, that's almost twice as big as the other ones. Later on in the study, they actually kind of normalized everyone. They just put everyone into more similar groups, and you could actually see that the tendons kind of caught up with one another because they didn't euthanize all the horses. They kept some of them to continue the study on. But the point here is that if you take a child when they're building their tendons, they build their tendons by way of loading, daily loading their tendons. And if you take away daily loading, you're probably going to be retarding their tendon growth. And by the time they're skeletally mature, can you reverse that? I don't know, but it seems like normal tendon growth happens with people before they're skeletally mature, consistently loading, which is just common sense. So there was this argument of back in the day they used to call it tendinitis, and they said tendinitis because the itis means inflammation, and then they went to tendinosis, and the osis means degeneration, structural degeneration, and then they later on went to tendinopathy just to say that the tendon hurts. We don't know why it hurts. It could be inflammation. It could be degeneration. But the tendon hurts, so it's safer just to say tendinopathy. But this study was done on patellar tendons, and they said they looked at early stage patellar tendinopathy and late stage tendinopathy. So early stage, let's go back to you overloaded the IFM. You're probably going to see elevated inflammation markers in an early acute tendinopathy. But once the IFM is overloaded and you've went on for a long time and now you're into the degeneration, you've disrupted the collagen, that's where you could probably say tendinosis because you have degeneration of the collagen, but you actually don't have much inflammatory signals. So it's not that the itis and the osis are incorrect. It's probably that the itis makes more sense if you have an acute early stage tendon pain, and the osis makes more sense if you have a late stage chronic tendon pain. But if you want to be safe, just say tendinopathy for anyone experiencing tendon pain. And my last point is to load the sucker. I say it all the time that you got to load the tendon. You got to load the tendon to maintain structure. You have to load the tendon to reverse pain to get back to normal. So they did this study on people with patellar tendinopathy, and they imaged. So this is again cutting. If you cut the tendon in half, you look down the barrel of the tendon, and you can see that before training, those are the tendon fibrils, which the collagen's packed in there. And then after training, after 12 weeks, you see 70% increase in fibril density. So you have way more collagen just from loading the sucker. And these are my references at the end. But anyways, that's my take on 30 different tendon concepts. And I hope that has made sense for you. If you want to dig into any more of these ideas, I linked all the research that I used here. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed.